Now, this IvyConnect is a series we are doing based on feedback we've gotten from talking to a number of students across the IITs, IIMs, accelerators, and early stage entrepreneurs. So today we're focusing this on the art of storytelling. And thank you so much. We have Sneh Vaswani, who's a co-founder of Miko. Miko is one of IvyCap's portfolio companies. And Harshit, who is part of our investment team, who will provide some input. Now, why storytelling? It's easy. We often think about pitching to an investor or pitching to a customer, but what is really important is how you tell a story about your startup. And why it's important is how you get people engaged. It's how you build your brand. It's how you put a lot of information across in a way that engages your audience, is of interest to them, and also stays with them. So a little bit about the format today. I will, after I'm done, I'll pass it on to the executive director of IIM Kozhikode. And then post that, Sneh will share some stories about, how he built, the story about Miko, how Miko has grown. Harshit will provide his input about, from an investment perspective, what does an investor look at, when he's listening to a story a startup is telling. And then we are going to have 3 to 4 founders, tell us a story about their own startups with feedback from Sneh and Harshit. And then post that, we will open it up to questions. So, without kind of taking any more time, Professor Rajesh, over to you.
Thanks, Dr. Anuj. Thank you very much for having us here. Anju, thank you very much. So, primarily, this is a very important collaborative event that I'm proud that E-Cell has taken up, and IIM K Live, E-Cell, and IIM Kozhikode is partnering with IvyCamp to do this for startups. Because one of the things that most often than not that people forget it is the messaging is pretty important in the evolution of startup journey. And how you message and tell your story to various stakeholders across the startup ecosystem is pretty important for any startup founder to understand. And I'm sure, with the kind of expertise that Anju and the team at IvyCamp and Sneh has got in terms of this experience of pitching to a variety of people across the stakeholder ecosystem, including the investors, one of them, is pretty important learning for all of us. The second thing that I thought, I should also mention is that IIM K Live is an incubator that was started in 2016. We're about 6 years old. And to correct Dr. Anju that I'm only an executive director, so I am not a director of IIM Kozhikode. Executive director of IIM Kozhikode Live, and I'm a faculty member in the strategy area. So trying to manage this entrepreneurship ecosystem at this current point in time. And we have about 120 odd startups, and we have grown not in the likes of the leagues of the bigger schools, but we have recently gone about trying to support this ecosystem in our own small way. And all these small contributions are what I believe is going to make it big. So because I'm reading a book by one of our mentors, his name is Amitabh Agrawal. He's written a book called as Small is Big. And I thought, that's pretty important in terms of how startups look at focus on small things to achieve big goals. So with that note, let me wish success to this event and good learning experience to all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Rajesh. Sneh, over to you. If you could just give a quick, brief introduction, and then, whatever you want to talk about, why do you think as a founder yourself and a successful founder, why is it so important for a founder to be able to tell their story?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Anju. Thank you so much, Rajesh, and so glad to meet all the students and the others who joined on this webinar. I represent Miko as the co-founder and CEO. Just a very quick background. We are a global deep tech consumer brand, bringing consumer robots that engage, educate, entertain kids. The brand is a fast growing brand that has a user base across 140 plus countries, and is focused at leveraging AI and robotics to ensure all-round development of kids aged 4 to 8 years of age, where these robots talk to you, profile you, they are emotionally intelligent, they are able to understand the child, and then build up the experiences of a multi-dimensional ecosystem of experiences to kids. Like the robots play hide and seek, they play dumb charades, they'll teach you something. And so each day as the child grows with the robot, it's a new learning experience for the child, focused in a direction where the child needs attention as desired by the parent and so on. The brand has seen its journey from door-to-door selling in India to all the way to being at the big box stores in the US across other geographies. And at each point, trust me, this kind of company is not your regular .com startup that you see as a tech startup, as some marketplace selling something, or trying to do something in the healthcare or fintech space and so on. You can't find clear parallels for a company like this. So it has communicating a company like this has had its I've had a huge share of learnings myself in the past 8 years of our existence. That is there. While And I'll share certain aspects of the storytelling experience. I think communication and saying the right message to your investors, to your customers, to your employees, to your suppliers, plays the fundamental aspect of setting the base of your culture as an organization. And my biggest learning was, and I'll just be very candid enough to share that probably I must have pitched to more than 500 investors and heard, the number of no's I've heard in my journey, no one else would have heard, I'm pretty sure. But then I've been fortunate to also being able to align some of the best investors who we were able to welcome in our cap table, and they've been supportive in this entire journey, which is there. So on the other hand, when you are talking about your company to your customers, to the whole narrative from a 30,000 feet view has to come to a grassroots level of value-based selling on what the product and the platform has to offer for a parent. Then there is a communication angle that goes on for the kids, because the vote of consent of a child is required. So your brand ads need to talk the language where kids approve of it and so on, that I need this, parents approve of it. Yes, it's a must have for my child. It's an investment for my child. And then you are building up, you are bringing a technology company coming out of India, growing a brand in the UK and US, which is unheard of. It's generally the US and UK brands coming to India, and you are there positioning as an Indian tech company coming out with products that competes with the Japanese, the Chinese, and the American products over there, doing much better than them, growing faster than them, and getting the love of Americans. We initially thought that our audience in the US would be Indian Americans, but we were so wrong. It was all the Caucasians and the Western audience born and brought up there, who were the earliest and the fastest adopters and form a majority segment. So there is a communication that you need with your suppliers, you need with your channel partners. They need to see the big picture and invest into you. For our manufacturers, we were probably the smallest customer when we started, and now we've become a sizable customer for them over the past 8 years. And we were the only customers for them out of India. They only used to either work with American counterparts or Japanese counterparts and so on. So there were a lot of there are a lot of first times that you had to do and break the ice with a lot of them. I think the key aspect of this entire journey of pitching to an investor and narrowing down onto that, beyond your Excel sheets and your business plans, I always believe that it's not about in a factory, it's not about the machines, but it's about the people behind the machines. When you do a relationship with someone and you build that relationship. So even for the investors, it's extremely important that they are able to see your conviction, your confidence, and the journey that you portray going forward. It's okay for an investor to tell you no, and 6 months later, 12 months later, when you said that I promised I would be delivering this and I have reached here, that builds in tremendous conviction in your journey. And most of the funds that that we've been fortunate to have on our cap table, and I'm sure even Harshit will tell you that they go through at least 40 to 50,000 decks each year, each partner goes through. So the amount of time that they would get on any company would be less than 2 to 5 minutes in the initial screening stage. And then probably if a partner comes and meets you a 1 or 2 hour session, they will build that entire perception about your organization in that 60-minute session. And if it clicks, then you get onto the IC meeting. So the odds are very, very low that they are able to understand everything about your business. So you need to, when you are communicating, you need to use the exact words to the sentences that would strike a chord with that investor. There is a deep tech investor on our cap table who loves the technology and wants to go deep in what else can the technology do. There is a consumer investor on our cap table who understands the consumer space. For them, technology set at one side, what consumer taste are you changing? How are you measuring? And what will it become 5 years down the line is of more importance to them. There are impact investors who want to understand what is the impact that you are creating when with your product, when they engage with the Miko. What is the value? What is the impact, and how are you measuring that impact in the child and so on as a child interacts with the robot? So your entire story will have multiple facets to it. And with the limited time that you get with every investor, you have to focus on the key aspects and go deep in that side of your story, which would strike a chord with that investor. So that is extremely crucial for you, that you profile the investor do a deep down check about what kind of companies they invest into, what has been their thesis, and then ensure that you focus on that side of your story which would appeal to that investor. Having said that, don't go overboard in changing your entire pitch to another investor. I would say your story will have multiple sides. Focus on the side which is relevant to that investor is the key. And investors would want to see throughout, like beyond the investing side, on the consumer side, on the other aspects, we would basically, we've seen how literally I've sold my products on a retail store for a month, trying different pitches to consumers, and for 2 weeks without getting any sales, sold the entire stock in 1 day after at least 8 iterations of our pitch. So over a period of time, you will realize what pitch is working with the broadest segment of the audience in your TG, and from a retail pitch to how you appeal to your employees, and so on. Each of these aspects play a very important role. Before passing back the mic, I'll share a very short 2-3 minute story. And as a first generation entrepreneur, we were always wanting to see how credible large institutions are built. And I was very fortunate to have interacted with Mr. Nandan Nilekani in 2015 when we started our organization. He's basically started an NGO where they called Ek Step, where they are looking at impacting 400 million kids across a decade-like horizon of the big number, 400 million. When I walked into their office, right from the CEO to every single person within the organization spoke the exact same story. And often when you meet peers in different startups, they would basically the CEO is the one, and the co-founders are the one who are emanating the core message. And by the time it reaches different layers within the organization, the message is lost. And if you go and ask another person like an engineer, why are you doing this? Then he'll say, oh, because I like this engineering challenge and so on. But the big picture is missing. In that organization, every single person was so aligned. Like if you talk to them about each step, in 10 minutes, each of them would be as geared to do like a typical investor pitch, and bring the big picture to you, that what are they trying to solve and why are they trying to solve. It just enlightened us with the kind of awareness that you need to spread within the organization and set the culture straight. And that entire core team of folks who are at H-Step, they are the guys who were at the core team of Aadhaar. So they rolled out Aadhaar to more than 1 billion people. So you realize that when you have to do something at that scale, every single element of your entire organization structure has to be aligned with the messaging and the story, which is very important, not just for your investors or anyone else. So that ensures that you're building a resilient culture within the company. And that was my key learning from there, which we tried our best to imbibe within Miko as well going forward. But yeah, that was a living example that actually taught us at Miko how to go about building the culture. So I'll pass on the mic back to Anju.
Thanks so much, Sneh. I have like a lot of questions, but I'll wait. That was great. Thank you so much. It's always nice to kind of, hear the personal story, and which is why it's so, we really want to get IIT and IIM alumni in these things, because people and students and young entrepreneurs always feel a connect. It's like, at least there's more of a connect. Somebody's been through what I've been through, right? Which I've realized makes a huge difference. So thanks so much for that. So I'll turn it over to, Harshit. He does look, a little bit different from his photo. That was the first thing that got me. All the hair is gone. But, thanks, Harshit. Harshit is part of our investment team at IvyCap. So Harshit, would love to hear from you, especially kind of for an early stage kind of founder or somebody who's looking to get into this, as an investor, what makes kind of a startup or a founder stand out for you when you hear from them versus just, we're going to make you a lot of money and here are our numbers. So would love to hear kind of the story behind all that from you, all yours.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Anju, and thanks everyone for joining. I think Sneh brings a really interesting perspective from the seat of an operator and the importance of the story, not just as it is important to an investor, but to the entire stakeholder ecosystem that exists, from your customers, your suppliers, and the employees and the culture, etc. I'll spend most of my time just trying to narrow in on the investor aspect of it and double click on that and try to give a slightly deeper view. Areas that I'll largely talk about are, how should one think of storytelling in the context of fundraising for your startup, why it's important, how you can go about it, and then also some reality checks towards the end of it that should be noted as you go along the journey. And it is true, I think, as it's been mentioned, that having an authentic story is pretty important for one when you're really embarking on this journey. Now, if you think of storytelling in the context of fundraising for your startup, probably one of the best ways to view it is that it's your responsibility to build out a narrative. The entire narrative is in your hand. It's in your control. It's a vision that you see and a future that you intend to build. This is, a space where you have a clean slate. Often you will run into investors, especially senior investment professionals who are partners at venture funds and have, been in the industry for a while. They'll, of course, have their own insights and point of view and their own outlook. However, it's a fairly common practice for one to come into a meeting with an entrepreneur and come in with an empty mind and an empty slate and allow the individual or the founders to drive the narrative and paint the picture ground up and understand the reality as they see it. So storytelling in essence is a very powerful tool and that lies with the entrepreneur to create the initial impression and the initial, or set the right tone when you're building these interactions with investors. So if you're looking to understand how should I think of storytelling, it is really a tool for you as a founder or an entrepreneur to drive the discussion from the first point on, because often meetings between founders investors start with maybe someone giving you a 30,000 foot view on the investment firm, but then a lot of the initial part of the discussion is driven by the founder with a pitch or in any other format, whether it's a discussion or an elevator pitch, what have you. So it's something that definitely can really shape up how the rest of your journey with that specific investor goes as you begin to engage there. I found a quote from a fantasy and fiction author, Brandon Sanderson, that I thought really fit this, where the quote goes on to say, the purpose of a storyteller is not to tell you how to think, but to give you questions to think upon. So it's really, an empowering tool for entrepreneurs to build upon and lead from there. And that's how I would encourage, viewing storytelling when it comes to startup pitching and fundraising. Now, moving on to why storytelling is important amongst all the other things that are there, is because quite often your first impression is your last. This is not 100% true, but it's true enough to be worth mentioning. Sneh commented and mentioned about the number of pitches that come into an investment firm and the ratio of startups that exist to the startups that get funded. And all of that is true. It is just, the situation is such, or the markets are such, where the ratio of capital available and the investors and the transaction that happen to the number of startups is skewed to a lower amount. And in those instances, just by virtue of, time and energy that investors can put into each company, you do get that initial window to leverage and then use that to then open up more doors, more interactions. Because if your story resonates well with an investment firm, and if it's not a good fit for them, they may recommend you to someone else or refer you to someone else in their investor network that may find your company is a good fit. So it can lead to many ways, provided that you can use that first impression or the initial window you get in a strong way, which is why opening with a good story that resonates becomes very important. There are some things that I had learned, earlier in my journey of trying to learn about stories and public speaking, etc., which is that people don't always remember facts, but they remember narratives and themes and big picture ideas. And it is also true that people don't really remember what you say, but they remember how you make them feel. So if you're building something, especially that's going to resonate with the consumer audience, if they're made to feel an emotion, if you're able to bring that human element and human nature out of the investor, you're likely to get them excited enough to take the next step, which is learn more, spend more time, meet your team, etc. So the objective of getting the investor excited can all happen just in the first go when you present a story to an investor. Another reason why storytelling becomes very important is because it is a very strong indicator. Indicator to a few different things. It indicates your clarity of thought. It's critical that your story should be well thought of, well sounded. It shouldn't be broken, and it should fully add up. You should be able to paint a reality out of what the vision for your company is. And often, at least for senior investors who've seen different companies pitch over many years and thousands of presentations, it's easier for them to come to the conclusion of what their vision, what the viewpoint is, but it always remains a strong indicator on the clarity of thought that the founder has. And this is an opportunity more than anything else for a founder who is well prepared, has really refined their pitch to be able to build that in front of an investor. Apart from being an indicator for clarity of thought, it is also something that allows you to demonstrate character, depth, and purpose in your story. Often there are founders and companies that are really built out of personal experiences of individuals or problems that founders feel really passionate about. And the stronger the story, the stronger the purpose, the more depth comes in and the more engagement you're able to drive, which again leads to the opportunity for more discussion with investors as you move ahead, given the skewed ratio that we discussed. And the third thing why I believe that the story becomes really important is because of just fundamental alignment. You will always only enter into a deal or a long-term partnership with the founder when you both have a similar vision for the business. It's not very specific in terms of numbers, etc., but directionally you want to head in the same world. An example could be if, say, someone like a Swiggy on day 1 or 2 said, hey, I want to eventually have lots of cloud kitchens, versus them going and saying, hey, I want to be this delivery focused player that allows restaurants to list. So they're very different visions for the business. So fundamental alignment between what you intend to create also allows, just for efficiency between your time, the investor's time. If you feel that things are not aligned, if the vision isn't on track, it's always helpful to double click on that and seeing where the misalignment is and what can be done, how can things come around it. So as you think of storytelling, it's critical to understand that given the nature of the time or the skewed metrics, it's important to build a good first impression and use this as the opportunity to give the strong indicators and align with the investors that you're speaking to. Now, how can you go about storytelling? Two things matter the most, as I would suggest. One is your fundamental communication skills and the content. For the communication skills, it's about your ability to deliver a message, whether it's verbally or in presentation format. I mean, what I've found helpful in different settings is to write it out, really script it, redefine it. Even Sneh mentioned of being articulate and concise with what you communicate. You can always sort of, if you're not a person who's comfortable with presentations, especially to a group of strangers or people you don't know very well, and it gets to your nerves, you can do a few dry runs with friends, family, etc. But it's, totally fair to go back to the classroom approach, do the drill and build confidence, recognizing that you're going to have a short window with a wide number of people and you want to make the most of it. So communication skills is very fundamental and becomes a very critical piece. The second piece is content. It's hard to give suggestions here, as this is your idea and a vision that you're going to drive through your ambition, but it's critical to be sharp, to be structured, and to be succinct in what you want to communicate. If you are maybe derailing or maybe going into the weeds in a 10-15 minute discussion, it can hurt the presentation. And lastly, come to the reality checks that I think it's fair to lay out when you think of storytelling. I would encourage viewing storytelling as a clickbaity title to get you to open an article that's similar to what it may be for an investor, because over a period of time, the more you will notice that the more institutional investors or more established funds will always do their length and breadth of due diligence before a final investment decision. But what you want to do with the story is get them to double click on the article and want to read the entire story before making that call. So it becomes really critical to recognize that this will take you so far. But then beyond that, it's the fundamentals of your business, what drives you as an individual, and a lot of other factors that get to the investment decision. I recognize that time is up. I will leave you with a quote from Albert Einstein that says, logic will take you from A to B, but imagination will take you everywhere. With that, I'll give it back to Anju.
Thanks so much, Harshit. Before I just turn it over to Gokul, where the founders can start, one thing I just want to emphasize what Harshit said. What really comes out when a founder is talking is their passion. So when they're telling a story about their startup, you can tell whether they really believe in what they're doing, how passionate they are. And that makes kind of a big difference. So if you can get that across, and to Sneh's point, you have to believe in what you're doing. Just don't give up. And in fact, at our recent IvyCap day, we had Harsh Mariwala from Marico talk about it. Is that the most important thing for an entrepreneur is perseverance. If you believe in what you do,